Mitch Gallagher. Welcome to the Sweetwater Minute. This time out, we have a special guest and a very cool new synthesizer for you to check out. This is Enrique Martinez, technology evangelist for Novation.
That's me.
Great to see you, my friend.
Yeah, pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Happy to have you here, and we are checking out PEAK. Now, tell us what we're looking at here.
So PEAK is Novation's new polyphonic synthesizer. It's a new addition to our synth family as well, because it's been quite some time since we came out with a new synthesizer, especially a polyphonic one. This one here, we've been basically hard at work getting this guy out as smooth as possible, as well as packing in a ton of features and a ton of knob per function features as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's an interesting synthesizer, 8-voice polyphonic, and it has a unique topology because you're combining a new way of looking at oscillators along with some analog. In fact, the catchphrase is analog where it counts and digital where it matters, right?
Right.
So the signal path is actually hybrid. Tell us, or why don't you give us kind of a tour of the signal flow through the synthesizer?
Yeah, definitely. So where we first start off, of course, is the menu. And here you have a ton of different features that you can then finally crack in and dive into the synth and really break it open. But I mean, to get a beautiful sound out of this thing, you don't even have to touch it because there's so many knobs on here, as you can see. We start off right here in the oscillator section where we have 3 oscillators, new Oxford Oscillators as well. So the difference between these versus traditional digital oscillators are, whereas most are at 44 kilohertz, these guys are at 24 megahertz.
Wow.
So the sample rate is really insane, and the things you can do is pretty nuts because you have basically an analog wave shape, but then a ton of wavetables between, and basically the digital control that really help you get this to the next level of a synthesizer. Shortly after that, we come over here to the mixer section where we've got the 3 levels for all 3 oscillators, ring 1 and 2, which is a great addition to any sound that you're using, as well as a noise. And the noise is nice because inside you also have a low pass on the noise as well, so you can get really deep or bring everything in.
Okay.
Shortly into the VCA, and this is where everything starts getting analog. So VCA is analog, as well as the filter. The filter is great. You have a low pass, band pass, and a high pass, as well as the 2 different envelope destinations right off the bat. More as well, of course, in the mod matrix. 12 dB and 24 dB for its slope. Big old cutoff knob, as most of our products have.
Right.
Resonance, pre-drive or pre-filter overdrive, and then the Oscillator 3 filter mod. And this guy's really fun because it'll take whatever signal Oscillator 3 is producing and then affect the filter cutoff. Yeah, and we'll get more into that in a bit. And one of my favorite features here is this knob to affect key tracking. Whereas most is half full or none, or on or off, this guy actually lets you get these weird increments of key tracking towards the filter.
Nice.
Right after this guy, we have one more analog circuit, which is this post-analog filter distortion. And then we come into the effects, which are absolutely beautiful. I love all these, and they are, of course, digital. But the beauty of these is they run parallel with the analog signal. So they're not engulfing the analog signal and then turning it back into digital. You still have the analog signal path accompanied by the digital delays and effects, or you can just simply bypass them.
I see.
Yeah. And up here on top, 2 separate LFOs, both of which have different sync rates, low, high, or you can sync it to the tempo. Different shapes, we have triangle, saw, square, and sample and hold, as well as a dedicated fade knob, which is really nice. And then you have an envelope for the amp, of course, and then 2 separate mod envelopes, which are also really powerful. And then, of course, glide and an amazing arpeggiator as well.
Right. And as far as the modulation matrix, you mentioned the modulation matrix, and there are 16 types and 16 destinations as well, right?
Right, so there's 16 different mod slots that you can choose from. And as far as the destinations, there's a ton of different ones. I want to say there's over 20 different, but I'm not 100% sure. I can't remember the last time I counted. And each one, which is also unique, can be affected by 2 different sources. Right, so they run together.
So you really can get into modulation if you want to.
Yeah, it gets really crazy really fast.
Right, right. Now, 2 interesting buttons on the front panel here are Animate 1 and 2. Tell us what those do.
So what the Animate does is you can select those easily as a source. So if I go back and I say on slot 15, I want it to go to the pitch, I can just turn that up, and right away I can say what my source is going to be, animate too. So now every time I press the animate button, it'll affect the pitch by that much.
Okay.
And if I tie that in, for example, with an LFO, the LFO won't affect the pitch until I press that button down.
Wow.
So it's a great way to kind of tie things together to make them work together to affect something and create something new.
Right. It's a great way to have a basic patch and then have two different ways that you can just hit a switch and really change what's going on.
Yeah, you can set it to do so many different things as well, especially having the 16 mod slots. You can basically completely change the patch in the touch of a button. It's a great performance tool, especially in the studio, to add some live touch to your music.
Right, right, absolutely. Now there's another very cool modulation source here, and that's that this has a control voltage in.
Right, so with the CV Aux Input, it's another source that you can select from, the very end, CV plus or minus. And basically any voltage that you send in off of a modular system or another semi-modular synth can then be routed to any of the destinations in the mod slot.
Right, nice.
Maybe send a sequence to your filter cutoff or something crazy.
Right,
Yeah.
right, fun stuff, fun stuff. Now there are so many modulation sources and destinations in here that you can almost approach doing FM type sounds with the
Right,
Peak.
and the beauty of this guy too is in the mod matrix, one of the destinations is exactly that. It will be the FM. So basically we have a linear FM setup here where 1 goes to 2, 2 goes to 3, 3 goes to 1. But then if you dive a little bit more into it, you can see that you can also send noise to 1. And on top of that, you can even send 3 to the filter on top of it already being sent.
Wow.
Yeah, so you can send how much of it goes. Basically this knob will then move accordingly to whatever you have sent there.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, and then when you start controlling all those different aspects, this is Polyphonic Aftertouch capable, and using it with a controller. You're using it with a Launchpad Pro here, which is a really, really fun way to play it. But of course, you can use any MIDI keyboard. It connects by USB as well, right?
Yeah, it connects via USB, and another great feature is you have 2 separate pedal inputs, which then can be assigned here depending on what you want them to go. You have PedSense 1, 2, basically sensitivity, and the mode. And there's even like, for example, you can possibly plug in like a breath control or something like that and have that be then in the mod matrix be sent to any of the destinations.
Right. So really a tremendous synthesizer for performance.
Yeah.
And for crafting really animated, live sounding, patches.
Right, definitely.
So you mentioned that the oscillators, these new Oxford Oscillators, which I think they're referring to as NCOs, right, instead of DCOs.
Numerically controlled oscillators.
That those have extensive wavetables associated with them.
Right.
Tell us a little bit more about that.
So basically in each of these wave shapes, the sine, triangle, saw, and pulse width or square, you of course have modulation of the shape or the wavetable within it. So even these analog waves have wavetables in them. So the sine, you can add a little bit more sizzle or take some away and make it more vocally. And then you even have 3 mod sources right off the bat. You don't have to dive into anything. It's just select this, I want it to start there. I want mod 1 to go that far, and then I want the LFO to go, you know, negative and get crazy. And then where it gets really nuts is in the more section. You come over here, and when you're in the more section, it'll tell you here, oscillator 1, wave more. You have the base station sine, comes from the base station. We were able to recreate it so well, thanks to these oscillators, that it gets a ton of girth and a ton of beef out of it. Then we also have random, zing. We have a ton of these. I believe there's 16 of them, bass organ, string, and within each of these, they have a ton of wavetable modulation between them.
Wow.
So you can use this to FM 2 and have 2 be a sine and have that be sent to 3, and I mean, it gets really endless. I can spend hours on this thing.
I can imagine so, yeah. Boy, is it flexible. It'll just do so many different sounds. And stepping through the presets and listening to those, I had a unit that I was able to get my hands on before we did this video. There's a really wide range of different tonalities inside the inside Peak. Is there a particular thing that you think it does really well?
I think what it does really well is like huge pads. It's really crazy. And on top of that, it does basses really well too, because you can reach some really low tones and get a lot of girth out of the thing. But the thing that I love using the most is just hitting initialize, starting from scratch, and it's so easy to come up with a beautiful sound within minutes.
Right.
You know, it's hard to not make a great sounding sound off this, especially with these effects. It's like instant bread and butter sounds.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And watching you play it, the other beautiful thing with all of these controls right on the front panel, right on the face of this, is that as you're playing, you can be changing things in real time and really affecting the performance and giving it a lot of expressiveness.
Yeah, for your basic controls and even past basic controls on the face of a synthesizer is getting a little rare nowadays. So this guy really has a lot of things right off the bat, like you're saying. I don't have to dive into any menus or nothing to get the sound going. I have all 3 oscillators laid out, mixer, the filter types, what's affecting the filter. You have multiple mod destinations on most of these knobs, so you don't have to set up a mod slot or anything like that. It saves those 16 for you because they're all right here. Yeah, it's endless. It's really, really fun.
Right. And it's very easy to see what's happening. You've even got little arrows that indicate the signal flow as you're moving through. So if you're new to synthesis, it's going to be a synthesizer that you can sit down with and start making sounds right away.
Right, yeah. We try to lay it out as linear as possible and almost as self-explanatory. Oh, okay, cool. This goes into that. That now goes into here. Sweet, sweet. Awesome, awesome. And then, of course, you can kind of see, you know, with LED feedback, what's doing what and at what rate and things like that, and what's being sent where.
Right.
Yeah, and the screen's a massive help too, because anytime you touch a knob, you'll instantly see the saved value and what your current value is as well.
Nice, nice.
Yeah.
So it really is the kind of thing where you can just sit here and play with all the controls, and great sounds are going to come out. And even if you don't have deep knowledge of synthesis, it's going to make great sounds for you.
Yeah, there's a ton of different ways to make sounds. Another one of my favorite features of this is the control over the voicing. So we have unison, right? And we can easily set it up with the 8 voices. We can go unison 1, 2, 3, 4, or 8. And within those, we can still have it in poly mode. So where a unison of 3 normally will lock you into mono mode, this can let you play different chords and you'll hear other things get choked and pulled out, which actually I really like that characteristic of some synths.
Right.
So you can control the spread, the detune, you got glide, the mode of it as well, which are different modes. For example, mono, mono AG, mono 2, which kind of reacts and changes the way the notes are played within the mono, if it's going to be like legato or a slide or re-trigger the envelope, as well as another filter post drive, which is a 3rd distortion circuit as well. If you really need it, you can get some really big sounds out of this thing.
Right.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Really incredible.
Yeah.
So whether you're new to synthesis, whether you're an experienced sound designer, whether you're looking for a synth you can take on stage, something that you can use in the studio, PEAK is going to be a great option. You really need to check this out. It sounds incredible and it's so fun to play with. Enrique, thanks for coming in today.
Mitch, thank you so much.
Really appreciate it. Why don't you take us through a few more sounds here to lead us out?
Yeah, awesome.
But thank you for joining me for the Sweetwater Minute. I'm Mitch Gallagher.